Thanks for the introduction. As Aneta mentioned, the Green Light Alliance its role really is to help everyone understand their role in the circular economy and promoting it within lighting. We're trying to encourage designers to think of buildings perhaps as material stores, as well as changing their approach to more minimalist design. And we're also helping suppliers of lighting to be circular ready, as we like to say it, through perhaps sharing good circular economy practices and examples. There's a lot to cover today in a short space of time, so it's not going to be comprehensive, but we're looking at opportunities, as Annette mentioned, smart technology and the transition over to circular economy. And whilst I'm not an expert in smart technology, particularly, I think I've got a good litmus for the appetite of this in the industry through the conversations we had in the Green Light Alliance. So this has been my journey through the last year or so in a deep dive into circular economy principles, and I'm sort of currently understanding the sort of scale of this movement and the impact for our industry. And it can be a bit overwhelming, but if we build a community around this process, I think the knowledge and practice can be shared. Unfortunately, many aspects of smart lighting and standardization are already really aligned to circular economy principles. So there's a lot of work which has already been done. So let's look at the circular economy core goals so we can understand how they're aligned with smart tech. So in the short to medium term, we've got a transition period, and this needs us to make use of the potential waste that we've already generated. And there's a lot of that. Ricolite alone recycled 45,000 tonnes of electric products last year alone, and that's only one compliance scheme. And then in the medium to long term, we've got future designs to consider. So we need to change the problem at its root through procurement, not just trying to engineer our way out of this alone. It needs both sides of these things to change. And we also need to find a way to stop materials ending up in landfill. And this needs a change to the economic models of things. So how can smart cities and buildings help be part of this? Well, smart tech has a huge role to play in communicating product information, fixture health, and retaining value in the product, which ultimately is what circular economy is about, is keeping that value chain as high as possible. It also presents opportunities for a culture change in the design, not just efficiency and waste reduction. We'll touch on that a little bit later on. A luminaire can only be as smart as the lighting project, so there's no such thing really in my view or as a sustainable product without it being part of a wider sustainable scheme. And I think importantly as well, open protocol, as Reinhardt mentioned, these are long-term solutions. To go circular is a 20+ year plan, and it's going to necessitate long-term adaptable systems. And that's probably going to, through the conversations we've had, it's going to favour adaptable systems. So we'll just touch here on the linear economy that we see on the left, and Reinhardt already mentioned the circular economy, and this is the butterfly diagram, which is from Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And it consists of the biosphere, which is organic matter. It can include things like the food industry. We're focusing on the technosphere. And within that, again, Reinhardt mentioned different systems. So we've got the maintain and prolong aspect of it, which traditionally we understand and we're set up for in a sense, but can still be improved. Reuse and redistribute, which we aren't set up for. And this is the big shake-up really as part of circular economy. And remanufacture and refurbish. And we touched on these today, but I want to look at the movement of these products in different lighting markets and where smart technology is needed to make it happen. So looking at maintain and prolong, this lends itself to owner-operators such as Transport for London, perhaps schools, hospitals, churches, and they might traditionally have on-site maintenance teams, facilities management. There's some great new sort of initiatives popping up with Stone Lighting through New and Whitecroft with their Vitality Relight, and they're extending duty of care. They're bringing new products to sites and to upgrade, and this offers some great opportunities because you can add technology to these products to make them more long-term, easier to maintain. And this can use components with standardized mechanical sizes or photometric things such as Zhaga components, but you can also store other data on them to do with their life expectancy, their burn hours and beam angles, things like that. So these types of process will add that smart application into these existing projects. Again, in the short and medium term, reuse and redistribute is a model where smart technology can help. So this lends itself to flexible spaces. So it could be a co-working space, it could be a large dynamic portfolio, like a retail portfolio. And previously I've worked in a company at Nolte where we worked with Selfridges, and they had chandeliers which they used in London, which they then refurbished and sent up to Manchester when they were having a fit out there. And that type of process requires a responsible owner. It also needs a design input. It needs a scheme to use products that are designed to be demountable in some way. And all the better if there are ways such as task lights or track lights where there's limited expertise required to install these. Smart techs can help with these with things like asset tracking, wireless addressability, which might help with commissioning of spaces if you're moving office or moving products from one location to another. And again, they can store important criteria on that asset, and it helps with your maintenance and procurement for that space. Of course, there's logistics to be considered, and a lot of the circular economy is about logistics. There's cost in packaging and movement of the product, but we need to consider offsetting that against the value that you retain by having a bit of flexibility in these products. And that capex, that initial capex, you make a saving against new installations and new equipment. So perhaps a model for slightly more long-term application is remanufacture. And we need to stop the products that we build now will try and be geared up for remanufacture. Now, if we look at this sort of splits into two types, but you might have a shorter life scheme that involves a variety of manufacturers. Now, this could be a hospitality, restaurant, it could be a high-end retail where there's a lot going on in the space. It could be a short lease office. And what this needs in order to work in terms of circular economy is a responsible client or responsible contractor if you're changing what's going on in that space. So again, if we're building products now, bearing this in mind, and Elena mentioned the digital product passport, that could include key information about that product's performance that helps the contractor determine the remaining or residual value in that product. That can then be reappropriated to a manufacturer. Now there's the Regen Initiative and Egg Lighting who have launched some remanufacture initiatives recently, and I think we're going to see a lot more approved third parties that are going to take on responsibility for this type of remanufacture of products. Recolight are also launching a scheme called New Lights for Old later this or next week, I believe. And that might involve manufacturers who have got old stock that hasn't been sold, they need space, and they will find a third party that will be able to bring that up to code or find a buyer or user for it. Now, again, the benefit of smart tech here is you might have the known burn time in a product that's already been used. Standardization is going to be key, so that, as Reinhard mentioned, that products can be upgraded and maintained. And importantly, with smart tech, you could create a pipeline of potential products that might be coming your way through future strip outs. Anything that can't be reused or recycled, the material passport or digital passport could include red list materials or any information on responsibly sourced materials in that product that again retain some of that residual value and mean that it's a green product that can go into a different pile for reuse or recycling. Importantly, when these products go back to market, you're, as a manufacturer, potentially accessing a different market, a bit more diversity. You can still perhaps get commission on these types of products. It's a lower investment from the manufacturer, and products could be refurbished, so they have some remaining life with extended warranty, or they could be remanufactured and as new. Slight variant on this model is the type 2 remanufacture is perhaps large schemes that come from a single manufacturer. Now, this relies on the manufacturer itself to be responsible. And an example might be a large industrial fit out, contracts with local authorities, or an office fit out. So again, the premise here is the same, that the products are supplied with the digital passport, which has key information on the product. It could also have information on embodied carbon or greenhouse gas emissions through things called EPDs, or energy product declarations. Again, manufacturers are offering take-back schemes from their old ranges, and they're not, they're not taking necessarily all of these back from everything, but they've launched initiatives to offer clients the ability to remanufacture their products if they wish. And it's great to see these products, or these initiatives already taking place. Now, remanufacture is a tricky process, and I know that Trilux have tried it and said that it's a non-uniform process. It's quite difficult to do, but the cost of remanufacture can be offset against virgin material. It's going to be driven by incentives and standards, as Elena mentioned, and there's informational value in old products, which you can't underestimate. How you can maybe re-engineer your product to use less material if you get it back from the market and you see where it's been used and abused and where it's stood up to the test. This is the easiest route for specifiers. It's the lowest risk to the client, but there's a high involvement from the manufacturer needed, and it may lend itself to different scales of manufacturers. And again, the material passport could contain information on red list materials or responsibly sourced and verified material chains. So we've looked at the product's journey throughout the market, but just to loop back onto how smart tech can also help change the culture. There needs to be a link from smart technology back to the designers and the manufacturers, which isn't happening at the moment as we'd like, and this is why we'd like to raise the profile today. Information on burn hours and failures is very helpful from smart tech, but there's also information perhaps on were there fewer sick days from the circadian lighting system that you installed in an office. Has there been more or less foot traffic through a particular street or shopping centre? Also an increased perception of safety. What are the usage patterns, real-time energy and maintenance savings? All of these, as well as perhaps an insight into some products that might be available in the future from a planned strip out, can go into a design from designers who are willing to kind of seek out these criteria and seek out secondary life products. As designers, we need to probe the client and their commitment on circular economy. We need to ourselves reduce, there's an aesthetic compromise to reduce the waste and to reduce perhaps the quantity of product we use, as well as working with our supply chain. We need to look at what's being inherited on a material. If it's a fit out of a Cat A building where there's some perfectly good lighting in there, would we consider adopting our design to include that? And we need to think about including things like future upgradability in our specifications to capture this detail. It's really important because we can talk about it, but if it's not written in our specification, then it can be value engineered out. And we need to determine a plan for these products at the end of their life cycle. So that's a conversation with the client, and it's about changing the brief. So briefs need to and will become more sustainably focused. And the scheme's lifetime, we perhaps on those last 4 models that we looked at, we can try and understand the best circular principles for that particular client and that project. So lastly, I'd just like to look at tipping the balance really. So there's a lot of points here on the left which we've come across as considerations for a move over to circular economy. And one is that operational energy for lighting is by far and away the most important or heaviest use of carbon within the lifetime of the product. Standards currently encourage new technology because this in-use factor is the largest emission factor, and newer products are more efficient. But the grid mix is changing and it's becoming decarbonised. And at that point, then manufacture and waste material will be a bigger part of it. We also have a cultural issue of the commodity attitude. It's a learned behaviour about the lack of actual value in resource and materials. But a study published by the Visual Capitalist suggests that copper is going to be too energy intensive to extract by 2050. And so as I mentioned about seeing buildings as material stores, we'll be able to track where these materials are. A study through third-party ISO-approved platform on a Whitecroft product showed that 70% of the greenhouse gas emissions on a particular product came through the LED and the manufacturer circuit board itself, which is only a tiny percentage of the overall mass and material used in a product. So how we measure this is becoming important, and how we capture that. Again, as Elena mentioned, there's going to be a circular economy British standard. You've got the eco-design regulations that have come through the EU Commission with their circular economy action plan. There's funding for smart cities. All of this is going to lean towards, in favour of circular economy. The linear process is undoubtedly more streamlined and very refined and optimised, but unfortunately it's become a race to the bottom. And there's going to be improved circular economy infrastructure, as we just mentioned, with companies like Regen and approved third-party suppliers and opportunities for urban mining. It's going to become an attractive business plan. Local supply chain also gives better environmental oversight. And lastly, one of the complaints is a lack of knowledge. How do we design for circularity? What's the viability and cost of my business for adopting this new economic model? It's a bit unknown, but again, there's that informational value in taking your product back that helps you better design your product for the future with more standardization, with modularity to enable remanufacture. And then as designers, we need to include this in our specifications. So we have TM66 by the Society of Light and Lighting. BREEAM are looking at bringing in circular principles into their standards, and then opportunities like Cradle to Cradle, where it's a very in-depth deep dive into the greenhouse gases and embodied carbon in a particular product, will become in more demand. And through some of the discussions that we've been having, these EPDs or product declarations are going to be needed to tender certain projects and become a ticket to play. So thanks a lot for your time. I've sort of rattled through that.